a lot of issue areas where we disagree, but I always think back to one of the most gratifying experiences I had in my first term, and it was your first term, we came in together, was when we realized about midway through our first year that we actually shared a lot of the same views on so-called, cleaning up DC initiatives or drain the swamp initiatives. And so we wrote an op-ed together in
All
USA Today, and we talked about term limits, lobbying reform, nonpartisan redistricting, and I still get people in my district that come up to me and say, "Hey, that was really cool. We love that you guys wrote that together, and we want to see more of that working together." And similarly on war powers issues, I've really admired your leadership and the way you've rightfully argued for Congress to reclaim its authority on foreign policy.
Well, I appreciate it. I really appreciated that op-ed, and I know that took guts for you to do, because it's not easy always to be for redistricting reform, and it's not easy to be against lobbyist funding. So you've taken on some of the thinking in your own party, and as I have challenged it on term limits, and I think we just need that kind of independence. And one other area that we've collaborated, I'm really proud to do this with you and Senator Young and Senator Schumer, is saying, look, we can't fall behind other countries on advanced technology. We can't let China take the lead. We can't take other countries take the lead. We've got to double down on investment in science and technology and make sure that that's not just in Washington or in my district in Silicon Valley, but why isn't it in Wisconsin and in our major universities? I mean, one thing that I was struck by, someone said that the top 20 universities in the world, 18 of the top 20 in terms of patents are in the United States. And by the way, University of Wisconsin is one of them. So there are a lot of great places that we can have this innovation.
Yeah, and you brought me along on that one, and it was only until I started really examining the historical record of the amount as a function of GDP we spent during the Cold War, and how necessary that was to win the Cold War on research and development, and how much that is atrophied. I think it's gone from 2% to like 0.3% or something like that. Where I kind of woke up and realized, my gosh, we need to make a massive investment in this area. And I think it's that creative partnership between, the federal government, academia, and the private sector, and particularly the area where you represent in Silicon Valley, that's deter conflict while still advancing our interests globally and without becoming a garrison state. So I'm really excited. I think we've got a really positive reception on that issue, and to have, Chuck Schumer and Todd Young and me and you working together, that's a pretty good bicameral, bipartisan mix right there.
Well, I think people need to hear some of these things, because you turn on the news and you'd say we're never getting anything done and you can't have any agreement. And look, this took, I think, some guts on your part, because you're not one of the people and the Republican side who says, "Oh, I just am opposed to any spending." You say, "Okay, what does the spending? Is it in our national interest?" And then we may disagree where it is or where it's not, but your help in making the legislation better. I mean, you said, "Look, is this money going to be wasted? Is it going to be actually going to improving our economic growth and jobs? Is it going to be a partnership with the private sector?" So I've appreciated it, and I think we need more of those kind of collaborations. But the one thing I think that's on all of our minds, and where you and I agree again, is the need to convene Congress. I mean, my perspective is that the country is, under a huge crisis. The issues of racial justice, the issues of riots across America. It's one of the seminal moments. I think we'll look back at this like we looked at at Dr. King's assassination or Rodney King, or as a moment which is critical to American history. I guess I don't understand why we're not back in session. I mean, we can social distance, we can have masks, I always do that, but I feel like we ought to be in session.
100% agree with you. Listen, I mean, if for no other reason than the Senate is in session right now. The Senate, is putting in 2 4-hour days, which is a hard day's work in the Senate. And we in the House are not. I mean, there's so many issues. You named a few of them. So many secondary and tertiary effects of the coronavirus crisis that we need to be debating. And I just think there are limits. While I do think it's okay in certain circumstances to do, virtual committee work, let's say, and there's some ways you can get creative with technology. there are limits to what you can accomplish. And part of Congress is convening and being there in person and having debates on these issues. And that's the only way the people's house has a chance of doing the people's business. And to your point, I think we're at a point to do it safely, right? We're not going to open up the Capitol for thousands of visitors. Did I lose you there?
Yeah,
Maybe I'll get closer to my wireless here.
Yeah.
Speaking of technology, I'll get closer to my wireless.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, look, there's certain things. One of the things I think would have been powerful is, I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you do, after 9/11, because you went to serve after that, but I remember being struck at how powerful it was seeing all the members of Congress out on the Capitol steps singing God Bless America. And you had Democrats and Republicans, and it's one of those times you get goosebumps and say, yeah, no, I'm for the country. And I just thought this could have been one of those times where, putting aside particular differences we have, we could have all been out there. I think the entire country felt the injustice of what happened to George Floyd. The entire country understands that we still need work to do on issues of racial justice. The entire country more or less understands that peaceful protest is part of what we are, and we could disagree on the specific of policy, but we could have, I think the Congress being out on the Capitol steps or showing some kind of solidarity for this country is so important, and you can't do that remotely.
And I would tie this into what I know you've worked a lot on, and I see it as connected to your work on war powers and reasserting Congress. I mean, I think this is maybe a very egregious example of the way in which Congress has kind of diminished itself in recent decades. I would say this is a trend that goes back at least 4 or 5 decades. And the problem is when you have a Congress that isn't playing that massive role when it comes to, solving problems and looking to compromise, well, then everything just becomes about politics in general and presidential politics in particular. And that becomes far more divisive. And Congress is sort of uniquely designed to force a lot of people with different views, like you and I, to work together. And when Congress sort of abrogates that role or is derelict in that duty, I think it creates a lot of opportunity for a more divisive brand of politics that I'm just not sure is getting us anywhere in this country. So I don't know. Maybe we can convince our leadership that we need to reconvene, but I'm not.
Well, I'm going to push, and
yeah.
I know you're pushing as well. Let me ask you this. I don't want to take up people's time too long, but I appreciate your tuning in. What do you're one of the, I say this in sincerity, very thoughtful Republicans. I know you understand issues of racial justice. I know there may be differences, but what would you say to someone, let's say the folks listening, a lot of progressives, to say, what are areas you think we can come together on having greater justice in the criminal justice system and on police violence? And what are areas you think we can come together as a country where someone like you from Wisconsin, a conservative district, someone like me in a progressive liberal district in the Bay Area, can start to figure out how we stitch this country together? I mean, do you have thoughts sort of at a high level on those issues?
Well, I think it's incumbent upon everyone in positions like ours to first look to our own communities and sort of all the ways in which we can do a better job of fostering a productive conversation. I mean, I feel lucky here in that we have very forward-leaning leaders in both the African-American community in Northeast Wisconsin and the law enforcement community who have done a great job over the last week of really coming together and trying to have a productive conversation and not allowing it to spiral out of control. As far as federal policy that's related to this, well, I do think, we can have a conversation about the extent to which federal policy results in the militarization between that and this specific incident. I just don't know enough about it, but that's one area. Obviously, this question of qualified immunity has come up. I have been trying to read everything I can on it. I think my initial gut instinct after only a few days of research, not being a lawyer myself, is that I actually think there could be an area where the left and the right could come together on that. I'd be curious for your take, but those are two obvious things. So there's sort of like a local level of leadership, and then there's areas where federal policy obviously interacts with this. But I do think, I worry, I think we all started off from the same place, which was just condemning this act, which just seems horrific. And I just worry that we went from that place to all of a sudden everyone's divided again. And I'm just not sure we're going to get to productive policy reforms that actually fix the problem if it's just, people shouting at each other. But I don't know. That's
Yeah, no,
my first
but
take.
look, I think this is what I think you're one of the very thoughtful members. I mean, I think the two things you said you'd be open to considering in terms of the militarization of police forces and looking at that issue and qualified immunity and looking at possibly doing away with it or chipping away at it. I mean, I think that those would be very substantive reforms, and it shows that it's not just lip service. It's not just saying, okay, we need to do something. I mean, those are at the heart of substantive reforms, and that's what gives me hope that maybe we can have a coalition. I think it would help. I mean, this is a little bit naive, but I wish we were just having more conversations like this between progressive Democrats and conservative Republicans. I mean, if you call yourself conservative, I assume you do. I mean, I've supported Bernie Sanders. You're a conservative Republican. You've supported a lot of conservative policies. But when you have a humanizing conversation and you're trying to look for common ground, it's so different than when you're shouting at each other on cable news. And I just think that if we had more of these kind of conversations, not accusing each other's of different bad motives, but searching for solutions, that would help.
Yeah, that's critical. Because I've found too, I mean, even in the areas where we may be furthest apart on policy, you can almost always identify where kind of the Venn diagram intersects, right? Like, I guarantee you there are areas on healthcare policy where, I'm never going to support, Medicare for all. And I know
I thought you were going to make news tonight.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But like, I would imagine when it comes to an issue like price transparency, we're probably close to each other, right? So you can always kind of carve out at least a little area. And I know that might leave people unsatisfied because, I'm never going to go far enough for your supporters and you'll never go far enough for mine. But I don't know. It's better than nothing. I'll say that. Or it's better than what we have now in the status quo.
Well, and at least you get to hear that a perspective and that someone is coming at it with a substantive, rational argument from their perspective, and that even if you disagree with it, you can respect their perspective, right? So, but so much of our conversation, we just delegitimize the other person. We don't even hear the other person, and so it's led to this extraordinary bitterness in our country. And partly, I mean, I do think it's generational. I mean, I think our class and the class after us and some of the younger members of Congress, we don't view these things as careers. We are in there to make an impact. We probably want to do other things with our lives too. And I think there's much more of a sense of let's get some things done and less about scoring rhetorical points or holding grudges.
Totally agree. And even if we have a fiery disagreement about in one area, it doesn't mean we can't continue to work together. I mean, we've had some knockdown drag out debates in the Armed Services Committee, but it doesn't mean that we're going to stop working together on other issues. I think there's another thing where
the difference is when we have substantive disagreements, you don't say, well, I'm not a patriot, and I don't call you a warmonger, right? We say, okay, we both have different perspectives about America's role in the world, and just avoiding those labels, I think, goes a long way.
Well, here's what I haven't quite figured out, and it's ironic, and maybe this is why this is the first time I've ever done Instagram Live. So, despite being a younger member of Congress, I'm not very tech savvy.
Well, you're doing great, I think.
I haven't figured out how to have those conversations in an environment where the demands of social media are so onerous, and it seems like social media amplifies some of the most negative voices and does not elevate the audience for a conversation across party lines. And so I'll confess to you, I just struggle with how to use social media as a member of Congress in a way where it doesn't degrade my analysis and make me less open to alternative views, as opposed to just forcing me back in my tribal corner,
Well, no, I think it's very thoughtful. I mean, a lot of the critiques of social media have been algorithmic amplification, that If you say something outrageous, if you say something provocative, that gets likes, that goes viral. A conversation like ours is not going to get as much attention unless one of us assaulted each other or got into a fist fight, it'd go viral. So that's a big challenge. I guess my view is I think we have to find ways to create compelling content of things that are authentic. And I think there's a hunger in this country for that kind of conversation, because those are the conversations people usually have in their living rooms. Those are the conversations they have with their neighbors. They don't have the kind of conversations that you see on cable news, maybe on a Thanksgiving holiday, but otherwise, usually that's not how people talk to each other. And I think the more we can show that the way I'm talking to you, maybe the way I talk to a conservative neighbor back home, that I think will resonate with many Americans. And I think we have to create alternatives to the kind of shock and awe culture that currently gets a lot of the attention.
Yeah, and I think so. Maybe the problem is less social media in general than traditional media in some ways, and cable news media in particular. I've never done good at the sound bites, and I do think you're seeing sort of non-traditional social media platforms, podcasting foremost among them, and in certain podcasts in particular, really kind of that are forums for long form discussion and debate where people are willing to, admit what they don't know and occasionally make mistakes. I do think you're seeing people respond to that, and there's a hunger for that. So we'll see if that changes the whole model of how the media works and how politicians in turn respond to media incentives.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Well, I want to end on the note that, one of my favorite books is Quiet Leadership. And you look at Google now in my district, and Sundar Pichai is the CEO, a very quiet, introverted guy, but he's substantive. And I just think that there is going to be a moment in this country where people will say at some point in Congress, we don't care about the loudest voices. We don't care about the fanciest tweets or things that go viral. We want substance. Like when you go to a doctor, you want the person who's actually going to cure you. When you go to see a dentist, you want the person who's going to fix your teeth. You don't really care how charming they are. At least I don't care how good their jokes are or how their personality is. And I think a lot of the work in Congress actually is really substantive. And so what we need is people who are going to solve issues and there to solve issues. And it's what I've always respected about you, Mike. I mean, you come from a great intellectual background, obviously great service to our country, but you're in there for the right reasons. And I hope we can get more people like that, or because our challenge really is, can democracy outcompete authoritarian capitalism in China and other models? I mean, that's what's at stake.
That is a great way to put it. And I actually think that issue is the umbrella issue that unites a lot of people right now. How do we compete successfully with the Chinese Communist Party? Well, as an introvert, though I haven't read the book, I'm down for Quiet Leadership. So I'll pick it up. And then when historians are writing, the history of this Congress, they'll dig up in my backyard, a time capsule with our op-ed and think, man, they should have just done what these guys argued for in 2017. It could have been so much better.
Exactly. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking time out on a Friday evening, and hope you stay safe, and I hope our leaders will be seeing each other on the House floor soon.
Thank you, Ro. Appreciate it. Well, hey, you're a new father, right? I'm going to have a baby in 3 weeks. What do I need to know? Or my wife's going to have a baby.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. Congratulations. That's big. Yeah, no, I got two young ones, a 2-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. That is some news, Mike. I'm excited for you.